If you are overwhelmed right now, if your mind feels exhausted but refuses to slow down, if you have too many responsibilities and somehow feel that you are failing at all of them, I want you to stop for a moment. You do not need to figure out your entire life today. You do not need to solve every problem. You do not need to become stronger. You may simply need to stop abandoning yourself in the middle of your own struggle, because sometimes the reason you feel stuck is not that you are incapable of moving forward. Sometimes you are exhausted from carrying a life that has required you to ignore what you actually feel. You keep going. You answer the messages. You meet the expectations. You take care of everyone. You work. You perform. You smile. You tell people I'm fine. And then when you finally have a moment alone, something inside you whispers, I can't do this anymore. But perhaps the most important question is not, how do I become less overwhelmed? Perhaps the question is, what have I been carrying that was never meant to be carried alone? Because overwhelm is not always a sign that you are weak. Sometimes it is information. Your mind may be saying there is too much. Your body may be saying, I need rest. Your emotions may be saying, something has been ignored for too long. And the part of you that has spent years being strong may finally be saying, please listen to me. We live in a culture that often teaches us to treat exhaustion as a personal failure. If you are stressed, become more productive. If you are anxious, think positively. If you are stuck, work harder. If you are tired, drink another coffee. If you feel lost, make another plan. But what if your problem is not that you need another plan? What if your nervous system needs a different relationship with your life? Today I want you to consider something deeply. Perhaps you don't need to push yourself forward right now. Perhaps you need to come back to yourself. And the first thing you need to understand is that overwhelm often begins when the demands of your outer life become greater than the resources available inside you. You can only hold so much. You can only suppress so much. You can only anticipate so much. You can only care for other people for so long without asking who is caring for you. And when the system becomes overloaded, the mind often begins searching desperately for control. You start making lists. You replay conversations. You think about tomorrow. You worry about money, your relationships, your work, your health, your future. You try to solve 10 problems simultaneously because your mind believes that if it can think enough, it can finally feel safe. But the opposite often happens. The more you try to control everything, the less present you become. You are physically in today, but psychologically, you are living in 20 possible tomorrows, and your body cannot rest inside a future that hasn't happened. So today, I want you to come back, not to your entire life, just to this moment. Look around you. Notice where you are. Feel your feet. Take one slow breath and ask yourself what is actually happening right now. Not what might happen. Not what happened yesterday. Not what could happen next month. What is happening right now? Maybe you are sitting in a room. Maybe you are lying in bed. Maybe you are working. Maybe you are listening while driving. Right now you are here. And sometimes healing begins by returning to the present moment, instead of constantly negotiating with an imaginary future. Now ask yourself another question. What am I feeling? And be careful. Do not immediately answer with stressed. Go deeper. Are you afraid, angry, lonely, disappointed, grieving, exhausted, overlooked, trapped, ashamed? Sometimes we call everything stress, because stress is easier to admit than the emotion underneath it. You may say, I'm stressed. But what you actually mean is, I am disappointed with the life I'm living. Or, I am afraid I will never be enough. Or, I am tired of being responsible for everyone. Or, I don't know who I am anymore. Or, I have been saying yes when every part of me wanted to say no. This is why slowing down matters. Because when you are constantly moving, you don't have to hear what is happening inside. Busyness can become a form of emotional avoidance. And this is not necessarily conscious. You may genuinely believe you are simply being productive. But sometimes productivity protects us from feelings we do not know how to face. If you stop, you might feel the sadness. If you become quiet, you might notice the loneliness. If you stop pleasing everyone, you might discover anger. If you stop achieving, you might wonder who you are without accomplishment. And that question can be frightening. Because many people were taught from an early age that their value came from what they did, rather than who they were. Be good. Be successful. Don't cause trouble. Make your parents proud. Don't disappoint people. Get good grades. Work hard. Be responsible. Help everyone. Don't complain. Don't be difficult. Don't need too much. Don't feel too much. And eventually you become incredibly good at functioning. But functioning is not the same thing as living. You can function while being deeply disconnected from yourself. You can have a successful career and still feel empty. You can have people around you and still feel alone. You can accomplish everything you once wanted and still wonder, why don't I feel fulfilled? This is where the deeper work begins. Instead of immediately trying to fix your external circumstances, begin noticing the internal pattern. Ask, what am I constantly doing to earn the right to feel worthy? Maybe you are constantly helping, maybe achieving, maybe pleasing, maybe proving, maybe staying available, maybe being the strongest person in the room. And what would happen if you stopped? Would you still believe you deserve love? Would you still believe you are valuable? Would you still feel worthy if nobody needed anything from you? These questions can reveal something profound. Sometimes what we call ambition is partly fear. Sometimes what we call kindness is partly fear of rejection. Sometimes what we call independence is partly fear of needing someone. Sometimes what we call perfectionism is fear of being criticized. And sometimes what we call being easygoing is simply a learned inability to express our needs. This doesn't mean your personality is fake. It means human beings adapt. We learn strategies that help us belong. We learn strategies that help us survive difficult environments. We learn to suppress certain parts of ourselves when expressing them feels unsafe. And eventually, those strategies can continue long after the original danger has passed. This is why you can be an adult and still feel anxious about disappointing someone. You can be financially independent and still feel terrified of rejection. You can live far away from your childhood home and still carry the emotional rules you learned there. The body remembers patterns. The nervous system learns expectations. And sometimes the person you became to survive is not the person you need to remain forever. So if you feel overwhelmed today, I want you to stop asking, what is wrong with me? Instead ask, what happened to me? And then go one step deeper. What did I have to become in order to cope? Maybe you had to become responsible, maybe invisible, maybe agreeable, maybe hyper-independent, maybe emotionally strong, maybe constantly alert, maybe the person who never needed anything, maybe the person who could always handle it. And perhaps today, that same strategy is exhausting you. The second thing I want you to do is stop treating every problem as equally urgent. Overwhelm has a way of making everything feel like an emergency. Your inbox feels like an emergency. Your unanswered message feels like an emergency. Your financial concern feels like an emergency. Someone's disappointment feels like an emergency. A mistake you made 3 days ago feels like an emergency. But not everything deserves immediate emotional energy. So ask yourself, what actually requires my attention today? Not everything, just today. Choose one thing, one conversation, one responsibility, one small action, and let the rest wait. This may feel uncomfortable if you are used to carrying everything simultaneously. But discomfort does not mean you are doing something wrong. Sometimes discomfort simply means you are changing a pattern. If your entire identity has been built around being available to everyone, becoming unavailable sometimes will feel like guilt. If your identity has been built around constant productivity, resting will feel like laziness. If your identity has been built around control, uncertainty will feel like danger. You have to allow the nervous system time to learn that a new behavior does not equal catastrophe. This is where patience becomes important. You cannot force yourself into peace. You create conditions where peace becomes possible. You sleep, you eat, you breathe, you move, you spend time in nature, you reduce unnecessary stimulation. You connect with people who make you feel safe. You create boundaries. You ask for help. You stop filling every silence with noise. And slowly your body begins receiving a different message. You don't have to be on guard all the time. There is another question I want you to ask today. What am I saying yes to that my body has already said no to? This question can change everything, because your mouth may say yes while your body says no. Your shoulders tighten. Your stomach drops. Your chest becomes heavy. You feel resentment. You become exhausted. But you still say, sure, of course, no problem, I can handle it. And then you wonder why you feel overwhelmed. Sometimes the solution is not better time management. Sometimes the solution is fewer things that violate your internal limits. A boundary is not an act of aggression. It is an acknowledgement of reality. You have limits. You have needs. You have energy that is not infinite. And you are allowed to protect it. You don't have to explain every boundary. You don't have to convince everyone that your boundary is reasonable. And you don't have to make someone happy with your decision before you are allowed to make it. This is particularly difficult for people who learned that other people's emotions were their responsibility. If someone is angry, you fix it. If someone is sad, you fix it. If someone is disappointed, you fix it. If someone withdraws, you chase them. And slowly your nervous system becomes organized around other people's emotional states. You are constantly scanning. Are they okay? Did I upset them? Are they mad? Do they still like me? Should I apologize? This is exhausting. And sometimes the most healing sentence you can learn is, their feelings are real, but they are not always my responsibility. You can care without controlling. You can listen without fixing. You can love without abandoning yourself. Now, if this message is reaching something deep inside you, I want you to write **** 777 *** in the comments. Not because the number itself possesses some magical ability to change your life. Use it as a symbol. Let 777 represent, I am ready to stop abandoning myself. I am ready to listen to what my body is telling me. I am ready to release what I was never meant to carry. I am ready to become conscious of the patterns that keep me stuck. Your comment becomes a small act of intention, a reminder that awareness begins with noticing, and change begins with awareness. Now let's go deeper. If you feel stuck, ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I actually change? This question is more powerful than it appears. Because sometimes people are not stuck because they don't know what to do. They are stuck because some part of them is afraid of what will happen if they do it. What if I leave this job? What if people judge me? What if my family doesn't understand? What if I say no? What if I disappoint them? What if I fail? What if I succeed? What if I finally become the person I keep saying I want to become? There is a strange paradox here. We can fear both failure and freedom. Because freedom requires responsibility. When you stop blaming circumstances for everything, you begin confronting your own choices. And that can be uncomfortable, but it can also be liberating. Because if you have some influence over your patterns, you are not powerless. You don't control everything, but you have choices. You can choose the next sentence, the next boundary, the next conversation, the next 5 minutes, the next breath. Do not underestimate small choices. A life changes through repeated moments that seem insignificant while they are happening. One day you say no. Another day you rest. Another day you stop chasing someone who keeps withdrawing. Another day you ask for help. Another day you finally tell the truth. Another day you stop pretending that something doesn't hurt. And gradually you begin living differently. Not because you became a completely different person, because you stop betraying yourself in small ways. And that may be the deepest form of healing. Not becoming invulnerable, becoming trustworthy to yourself. When you say you need rest, you rest. When you know something is wrong, you listen. When you need help, you ask. When something violates your values, you acknowledge it. When your body says slow down, you don't always override it. You become someone your own nervous system can trust. Think about that. What if the goal isn't to make yourself feel safe by controlling the entire world? What if the goal is to become someone who can remain present even when life is uncertain? That is a different kind of strength, because life will always contain uncertainty. There will always be difficult conversations. There will always be disappointment. There will always be things you cannot control. You cannot build a peaceful life by demanding that reality never disturb you. You build resilience by developing the capacity to meet reality without abandoning yourself. And sometimes that means accepting something very simple. You cannot do everything. You cannot please everyone. You cannot prevent every loss. You cannot guarantee every outcome. You cannot control how people perceive you. You cannot rewrite yesterday, but you can decide what you do with today. So if today is overwhelming, make today smaller. Don't solve your entire life. Drink some water, eat something nourishing, take a walk, put your phone down, finish one important task, tell one person the truth, take one genuine breath, rest, and if you need professional support, reach out for it. There is no shame in needing help. Sometimes we imagine healing as a private battle we must win alone. But humans are relational beings. Connection matters. Being understood matters. Having a safe person matters. Therapy can matter. Community can matter. Support can matter. You do not have to prove that you can carry everything before you are allowed to put something down. And if you have been strong for everyone else for years, perhaps today you can practice being honest instead. Maybe you can say, I am tired. I need help. I don't know. I can't do that today. I need some space. I need someone to listen. These are not sentences of weakness. They are sentences of truth. And truth creates the possibility of connection. Now I want you to imagine something. Imagine waking up tomorrow and not immediately asking, what do I have to do? Instead asking, how am I? Not what is on your schedule, not what everyone expects. How are you? What is happening inside? What does your body need? What does your mind need? What does your life need? You may discover that the answer is not another productivity strategy. Maybe you need grief. Maybe you need rest. Maybe you need to forgive yourself. Maybe you need to let go of a relationship. Maybe you need to create something. Maybe you need to stop pretending. Maybe you need to admit that you are unhappy, and admitting that can be the beginning of freedom, because you cannot change what you refuse to acknowledge. The part of you that feels overwhelmed may not be asking for a perfect life. It may be asking for an honest one, an honest relationship, an honest boundary, an honest conversation, an honest answer, an honest admission, this is too much for me. That sentence can be revolutionary. Because when you admit that something is too much, you can finally begin asking what needs to change. You don't need to shame yourself for reaching your limit. A limit is information. Your body has limits. Your attention has limits. Your emotional capacity has limits. Your time has limits. Respecting those limits is not weakness, it is wisdom. So today, don't try to become someone who never feels overwhelmed. Become someone who notices overwhelm earlier. Become someone who listens sooner. Become someone who rests before collapse. Become someone who says no before resentment. Become someone who asks for help before desperation. Become someone who notices the difference between responsibility and self-sacrifice. And perhaps most importantly, become someone who no longer confuses suffering with worth. You don't have to suffer enough to deserve rest. You don't have to accomplish enough to deserve love. You don't have to make everyone happy to deserve belonging. You don't have to be useful every minute to have value. You are not a machine. You are a human being. And perhaps you have forgotten that. Perhaps somewhere along the way you learned to measure yourself by output. How much did you accomplish? How much did you earn? How many people did you help? How much did you tolerate? How much could you handle? But there is another measure. How deeply did you live? How honestly did you speak? How connected were you to yourself? How much did you allow yourself to feel? How often did you choose what was true, rather than what was merely expected? Those questions take us somewhere deeper than productivity. They take us toward identity, toward the person underneath the survival strategies. And perhaps this is why feeling stuck can sometimes be the beginning of transformation. Because the old way of living no longer works. The identity that carried you this far has become too small. The role you played is exhausting you. The expectations you once accepted are beginning to feel unbearable. That doesn't necessarily mean you are failing. It may mean you are changing. Something inside you is asking for a more authentic life, and authenticity can be frightening. Because becoming yourself sometimes means disappointing the version of you that everyone else became comfortable with. You may have to stop being endlessly available. You may have to stop explaining yourself. You may have to stop pretending that everything is fine. You may have to let people see the real you. And yes, that can create anxiety. But there is a difference between anxiety caused by abandoning yourself and anxiety caused by finally becoming honest. One keeps you trapped. The other may be part of growth. So don't demand that every uncomfortable feeling disappear before you move forward. Learn to ask, is this fear telling me I'm in danger, or is it telling me I'm doing something unfamiliar? That distinction matters. Sometimes growth feels uncomfortable because it is new. A boundary feels uncomfortable when you have never had one. Rest feels uncomfortable when your identity depends on productivity. Vulnerability feels uncomfortable when you have survived through emotional independence. Being authentic feels uncomfortable when you have spent years performing. The goal is not to eliminate every uncomfortable sensation. The goal is to understand what it is communicating. And if you do that, your relationship with yourself begins to change. You stop being your own enemy. You stop constantly criticizing your emotions. You stop demanding perfection. You begin to listen. And perhaps one day when overwhelm arrives again, you will recognize it sooner. You will notice the tight chest, the racing thoughts, the irritability, the exhaustion. And instead of saying, I need to push harder, you will say, something inside me needs attention. That is awareness. That is maturity. That is healing. So if you feel overwhelmed today, don't make your first goal to fix your entire life. Make your first goal to stop running from yourself. Sit with yourself. Listen to yourself. Tell yourself the truth. Then take one small action that respects what you discovered. 1. Not 10. 1. Because you don't need to climb the entire mountain today. You only need to take the next honest step. And maybe that step is rest. Maybe it is a conversation. Maybe it is a boundary. Maybe it is asking for help. Maybe it is forgiving yourself. Maybe it is letting go. Maybe it is beginning. Whatever it is, take it gently. You have spent enough time believing that transformation must be violent, that you must destroy the old you, that you must become disciplined enough, productive enough, strong enough. But perhaps transformation can also be compassionate. Perhaps you can change without hating who you were. Perhaps you can grow while honoring the person who survived. Perhaps you can say, "Thank you for protecting me. You did what you knew how to do, but I don't need to live that way forever." And then you take another breath, and another step. And slowly, your life begins to feel less like something you are surviving, and more like something you are participating in. That is the invitation today. Not perfection, presence, not control, awareness, not constant productivity, meaning, not self-abandonment, connection. And if you remember nothing else from this video, remember this: you are allowed to stop. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to ask for help. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to outgrow an identity that once kept you safe. You are allowed to become someone your younger self could never have imagined. And you do not have to know exactly who that person is yet. Just begin by listening. Because underneath the noise, underneath the expectations, underneath the fear, underneath the endless need to keep going, there is still a part of you that knows when something is true. Maybe that part has been quiet. Maybe you haven't listened in years. But it is still there. And perhaps today, it is asking you for something very simple. Come back. Come back to your body. Come back to your breath. Come back to your values. Come back to your needs. Come back to your truth. Come back to yourself. The life you want may not begin with doing more. It may begin with carrying less. And the person you are trying so desperately to become may already be inside you, waiting for you to stop being everything everyone else needs and finally become who you truly are. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are.